Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Hindustan Times and my name is Aisha Varma. European leaders are stepping up diplomatic efforts to end Russia's war in Ukraine, with the UK, Germany and France backing a push for direct talks between President Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. Now, the three countries reaffirmed that Europe must play a central role in any negotiated settlement while continuing military support to Kyiv. For more, let's cross over to Thomas Sparrow, correspondent with our partners DW in Berlin. Thomas, European leaders are backing ceasefire talks, but what concrete preconditions are they insisting on before negotiations can move forward?
There are 5 concrete preconditions before negotiations can move forward. The most important of those preconditions is, first, that a ceasefire must come immediately, that a ceasefire must come before those negotiations. That is one aspect in which the Europeans do not see eye to eye with the Russian government. The Russian government believes that a ceasefire now would only help Ukraine to rearm, would only help Ukraine to regroup. That's one precondition. The second precondition, probably one that is also medium to long term, is guaranteeing security promises for Ukraine. That was what you understand under the concept of security guarantees. Essentially, in plain words, what that means is promising that Ukraine will not be attacked again after a settlement is reached. And among those preconditions, among those security guarantees, one of the issues that is discussed the most is whether Ukraine would become a NATO member or could become a closer partner to NATO. That is something that the Europeans favor, but that is a no-go for Russian President Putin. What you also have as part of these preconditions is that the contact line, so basically where the fighting is happening now, that must be there, that must stop for those discussions to begin. Again, an issue where Russia does not agree because they see that they can only put this war to an end when they have reached their goals. So while we're talking about European preconditions to join the negotiating table, it doesn't seem to be preconditions that are in the interest of the Russian government. So you see clearly here that the two parties are seeing very different priorities when it comes to ending the war in Ukraine.
At the same time, how is the situation on the battlefield shaping these diplomatic efforts?
So on the battlefield, basically, fighting continues from both sides, from Russian side and from the Ukrainian side. Russia attacking Ukrainian parts, and at the same time, Ukraine also attacking deeper into Russian territory, even close to St. Petersburg, one of Russia's most important cities. That is something that, according to analysts, according to experts, could make diplomacy on the one hand more urgent. And that's something that European leaders clearly see, the fact that on the battlefield fighting still continues after many years since the war in Ukraine began. But it could also make diplomacy more difficult because both the Ukrainians and the Russians see basically that with their fighting and with their military operations, they are at least moving towards their military goals. So it could make diplomacy more urgent, but it could also make those discussions at the table, at the negotiating table, much more difficult to achieve.
Finally, a major European project to build the next generation fighter jet has collapsed. So what effect might this have on Europe's push to strengthen its own defense?
So we're talking here about a very big French-German project to build the next generation fighter jet. That's a project that, by the way, began when the German Chancellor was Angela Merkel, so a few years ago. And it's a project that basically was inherited then by future chancellors here in Germany. And it is a project that indeed collapsed, specifically because of technical differences between the companies, the French and German companies that were tasked with actually building this next generation fighter jet. But what this actually reveals is that Europe has a very, very significant problem when it comes to joining forces for strengthening its defense procurement. What we have seen so far is that European countries are building different military capabilities according to their own military power, according to their own military strengths. Just to give you one example, there are 3 competing European fighter jets, and that's why there was the idea that if big European countries could join forces, that could help European defense in the long term, especially as the United States has been asking time and time again for Europeans to step up its defense, to step up its military capabilities. This is certainly seen as a blow to that idea that Europe needs to do more together when it comes to stepping up its defense.
All right, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with more insight. With that, it's a wrap.